And welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In this episode, we're going to get working on the sheet metal for the driveline tunnel. So with the seat belts in place and most everything else done inside the car, the sheet metal work is starting to kind of meld together, and everything's getting a little bit closer to being finished. So we're going to work today on getting the last piece. Is it the last piece? It's almost the last piece. It's the last major piece of this puzzle, which is getting that driveline tunnel formed up. There's some tricks and things that I have to pull in here to get this done. So it was a couple episodes ago where we actually got their transmission tunnel in. So we got the transmission tunnel finished off, but I really did need to get a few other things done, right? So that rust repair that I did 2 episodes ago, that needed to get done so the floor piece could get put in. Then I wanted to get the seat belts installed, so I knew where all the seat belt stuff went. That had to get done, and now I can get back to doing what probably in a logical order would follow, which is getting this piece actually finished up. All right, so the blank's been cut. So we've got that done, and oh yeah, all right, I was going to show you a few little things. So just hold a sec. These are just a couple of pieces, just a couple of little strips of 18 gauge that I cut. So it's exactly the same material that the blank is cut out of and will be forming. But you may have noticed that this is the very back. Okay, so that's what attaches just by the rear seat, and that's the transmission tunnel. So they not only have different shapes, but the radiuses here are different. And because the radiuses are different, it's not a matter of a simple calculation to try to work out where all of this stuff goes. So in the past, I've shown me sitting at the bench doing the calculations for how to get this sheet metal to bend and be in the right shape right after, like basically as soon as you're off the press, you're done. In this episode, what we're going to look at is a slightly different technique where we actually have to blend these two things together, right? So they're going to be, they're some distance apart, 30 inches, 28 inches, something like that. So I don't know what for the metric folk, what that would be, a long distance apart. Half my viewership is in Europe, right? So, and there's no one watches this channel. So I just keep going because it's fun. I don't care. Anyway, so we're going to have a look at how we can do this. It's not actually all that difficult. So we can do it mathematically and figure out the bend radiuses and where I should put those bends. Or we could actually template it up. So this is pretty easy. You just take a couple of strips, bash it over where it has to fit, make sure it's fitting exactly in the right place. So that's like a tight fit. They just clip right in place. And then you can take some measurements directly from this. The other way you can do it is you can just use a strip of tape. That'll work too. So just take a strip of tape and lay it over top. And I'm just going to use this as a check for where my calculated lines are. Because when you've used those paper panels in the past, they're not going to reflect perfectly where the bend should go on a larger panel. On a little panel, a little difference here and there you can kind of get away with. But on a larger panel, you can get yourself tripped up. So that's where these come into play. So when I'm done, as I'm forming it, I'll be checking it with these. And as long as it fits this, it's good. Okay, so that's the point of these particular templates. So I got to clear off my bench. It's a mess from the last job. The seat belts. Right, and then we're going to get to work. Now it's time to get that layout done, so we're just marking off the edges, both edges actually, both the flange edge as well as the ultimate edge of the paper panel. And scribing in the lines and getting all those things ready to cut it out. Well, Puppy decided to join me in the garage there for a little bit. It was nice to have him around. He didn't like it when the tools came out though, so off he had to go back into the house. Those are just the strips, so I'm just making those strips to create the empirical pattern there. Test those. Just a little bit of tapping around to get them right the way they want it to be. Perfect. Alright, so this is the tape trick where we just take a regular roll of masking tape and
put it over top of the area, and then roughly mark out where the tangent of the radius is. So I've done that for both of those, and then I'm comparing that to both the metal patterns and what are the other parts.
All right, so now that we've checked that pattern with both the metal shapes, right? So this is the formed part, as well as the tape. So I've gone ahead and laid some tape over it, and then roughly marked where the radius is, where the tangent to the radius would be. You can now check that, validate it back onto the sheet metal. It's important to do, I think, at least 2 of those steps. One of them maybe. I sometimes do both, just to make sure. You don't want to go ahead and make that panel. So you can see here on the previous effort, just from the paper panel, how far off we were. Right, so the paper panel is going to bend and it's going to fit. This probably is not going to show very well at all. I might just zoom in and give you a look here in a sec, just to show you a bit. Some parts were fine. Okay, so some of these marks, I've got some the red marks are indicating where things are going to lay out. The black marks are the original drawings that are from the paper pattern. So I always knew that the transmission tunnel end, we had a mistake there. I was putting it to the top part of where the bend needed to be, not to the center of the radius, because I've got a fairly good size radius up there. So I always knew there was going to be an error there, but it's little details, like there was going to be a 1/4 inch miss in the corner fold on one side. The other side was going to be fine, and then there was going to be a little miss here at the transmission or the differential end of the car. So just those little bits. You can always move an angle just a little bit with sheet metal. If you put it in the wrong place, it's not a big deal with a dolly and a hammer just to sort of shape those and move them out a little bit. But it sure is a lot easier if we just make the parts right the first time. Anyway, so I'll just do a little zoom in and poke around, and you can see where the mistakes were. Now, that's not saying that it's not going to have mistakes when I'm done. There's nothing you can do there. I mean, I can take my pattern, I can put it on here now, I can center it, I can then roll it to the radius, I can check each one of the marks to make sure it's right, knowing, of course, that I'm bending it in 2 different ways, right? So I have sort of an inside area here and an outside here that you've got to actually have as where the die needs to be placed to perform the bend. So there's some complexities that make that technique actually work a little better. Okay, so I'm just going to run you in and give you a quick look at it. Get away from the glare of the light. But here you can see a good example of where the paper pattern was telling me one thing, and where both the tape line and the steel pattern were showing me something different on this side. On the other side, it's fine. Both of those marks are fine. No problem there. Both of these marks on the other side were off just a little bit. This is the biggest error, of course, which we always knew would be the case, is that's where the paper pattern laid out, and that's where the 2 lines actually have to be to break the panel in the right spot. This side again was in error. That line's in the wrong position, and this on this side is just fine. So I'll just correct the lines here before I get going, and then I'm going to lay out and roll the pattern that I'm going to need to fill this area here. So what I want is the area where the seatbelt mount is going to go. I need that raised up, which means that I'm going to indent the rest of this down. So I'll roll some patterns. I did buy the Eastwood motor for my bead roller. So that's the kit that Eastwood sells. So far so good. Actually, it seems to work really well. Only complaint that I had was the forward and reverse were backwards. So that was doing my head in a little bit. So 5 seconds I undid the switch and turned it 180 degrees, and now the forward and reverse read correctly. You can't get everything, right? All right, back to work.
All right, this was fun, trying to get all this laid out. You have to be kind of part artist and part imagining where things are supposed to be. So I started by blocking off that area where the seat belts have to attach in the tunnel, and the rest of it was just copying lines and trying to make sure things look good. So that was quite a lot of fun to do. Now this was hard work. Try to get all this down and hold it up, and I didn't get I couldn't roll it all the way through. I had the wrong angle. Just trying not to make a mistake here, just struggling with it. It's fun to watch, actually. For as well as it turned out, I was surprised. That's my first time ever using the motor drive, so lots easier, million times easier, worth all of the money versus hand cranking, which you can just imagine if I tried to hand crank something like this, and I'd try. So anyway. So those are the tipping dies. That's the roller skate wheel plus that pulley that I made. And it's the only way to do that flange because it's got 3 different angles. So I think I only took like 3 tips to get it pretty much tipped up. Then a little hammer and dolly work there just to straighten that flange out, make sure it was all perfect and right where I wanted it. And then we're pretty much done with that. So out comes the sheet metal brake, and after transferring the lines for the bend lines onto the back, the folds take just a few seconds. They're nerve-wracking seconds though, right? I mean, you get this wrong and the whole thing's a mess. So that went in really nicely. Super happy with that. Everything actually lined up, even those the points across the fold are right where I wanted them. So that's great. Wow, are you shocked? I'm shocked. That just popped right in. Other than the effect of the radiuses, so I'm now tuning those up. I didn't show all of this footage, but you know, you're tapering the radius all the way back and around to get those to fit. Now I can finally cut the last little bit off that the transmission tunnel and get that fitted up, and then we're ready for a final fitment. A few little bends and tweaks and things here to get that all shaped right. Again, there's a little sort of blister on the passenger side of that tunnel that needed to be put in. So a couple of seconds with a hammer and dolly, you can do lots of work or damage. Oh, and now we're adding in the last of this is the seat belt buckle parts. So there's some nut plates that I made. And yes, I did actually use galvanized metal for that because it is out in the elements. I know I'm a bit anal, hey?
Alright, there it is, installed, the driveline tunnel. So happy actually with the way this turned out. You can see the detail here. It's not 100% perfect, but boy did it ever turn out good. I'm so happy with that. So the fit was, that's pretty much just dropped straight in. As you saw in the stop motion video, there was really no issue with the fitment. It popped pretty much right in to where it's supposed to go. The hardest part actually was rolling with the bead roller, getting those steps put in. With the length of the mouth in the bead roller that I have is not very deep, and it was really difficult to do. In fact, I had to reverse the dies on the roller, and so you only really saw me get 3/4 of the way around each one of those spots, and then I had to reverse the dies and then finish it all off, which was difficult, to say the least. Anyway, it's in, super happy. Haven't welded it in clearly yet,
but sure are getting there. Just going to show you the other side. Okay, so here we are on the other side. The seat is installed. Just wanted to give you a look at the clearance that we have here. Let's try to float it up. So with the seat about in the correct position, we're okay here. That's the slot for the seat belt. I've got about 1 inch, which is lots. Most of this is kind of well below the seat level. So that's going to fit really well. The seat belt will be able to get in there and work perfectly. Okay, so happy with that. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching the progress that we're getting here on the car. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, whatever. In the next episode, we will be moving on. Actually, we'll give you a preview. We got to get the false floor built. I have to get some seat rail modifications finished up. And then we can just keep moving along. Boy, if we can keep this pace up, we might finish this car by 2020.